Namaskar, my dear students. Now I am going to discuss the third subhead of Unit 1 of the paper 4036 in major course in Sanskrit under Guwahati University. The title of this subhead goes as General Survey of the Classical Sanskrit Literature in the Eastern and Western Literature. So, my dear students, in this subhead, what will be our focus? The journey of the specimen of classical Sanskrit literature from India to other places outside the continent. Classical Sanskrit literature that started with the composition of the Adi Kavya Ramayana initiated its multi-dimensional journey in the World Literary Forum long back. To undertake a general survey in this regard, we must look into the subject from three perspectives, namely translation, assimilation and adaptations. Thus, we have to see how the scholars of other countries outside India have put their interest and labor to translate the works of classical Sanskrit literature like the Ramayana, Mahabharata, various Puranas, works of Mahakavi Kalidasa, Bhavabhuti, etc. All these translations have endorsed the magnanimity of Sanskrit both as a language and as a vehicle of Indian culture. And that is why the survey should include all these things. The second group of scholars are seen to assimilate various thoughts and ideas of the classical Sanskrit literature with their own concepts, and they offer this way various literary specimens in the forum of world literature. So, it is also a vast field. This way, the philanthropic and holistic concepts of Sanskrit classical literature reached the world parlance. In this group, even the works of Indian Sanskrit scholars who took resort to other languages as the medium of correlating the ideas and messages reflected in the classical Sanskrit literature may also be accommodated. So both ways the contribution has been going on. The scholars outside India, they have also contributed, and scholars from India, they have also contributed to world literature. We have to decipher both the points. In the third group come those scholars outside India who got connected culturally with the land. Which land? The land lying on the banks of the Ganges, that is India, and subsequently developed various literary specimens on basis of the adaptations from classical Sanskrit literature. This is also a very important field for our discussion. Thus, Ramakatha of the Ramayana, the conversation between Krishna and Arjuna, the muse of the Mahabharata, the ideas reflected in the works of Kalidasa, Shudraka, Bhavabhuti, etc. have paved the way to conceive and compare various literary works by Eastern and Western scholars of different ages. While discussing the topic of translation, it can be said. Now, we will go through these 3 points: translations, assimilation, and adaptations. So, in the first case, in the context of translation, what we must study, what we must go through. While discussing the topic of translation, it can be said that the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Avijnana Shakuntalam, Meghadutam, Uttara Ramacharitam, Panchatantram, Hitapadesha, Anargha Raghava, various dramas of Bhasha, Bhartrihari's Shatakas, and many more have been translated into various languages of the world outside India. This point we will discuss. But for your convenience, I must say here that the world of translation of classical Sanskrit literature is a huge one, and everything cannot be accommodated because the process is on. It is a dynamic process. So, during same time, in different parts of the world, the same literary piece of classical Sanskrit literature is being translated in different languages. So, here I will give you a bird's eye view. So, the main topic, the main works done so far, I will try to accommodate in this point. Now, the translation of the Gita in English by Charles Wilkins started a history of translation of the book, and the translation comes from various foreign languages. The Persian translation of the Ramayana in the 16th century also added value in the process of journey of the Ramayana towards Western countries. Ralph Griffith's English translation of the Ramayana too could create a benchmark in the journey of the book. So these are the milestones. We have to remember these points. The Aranya Kanda of the Ramayana has been translated into Italian language by Carlo della Casa. Joseph Veccardi had composed a Hungarian translation of some of the important parts of the Ramayana. Similarly, the Mahabharata and its various parts have been translated in many world languages. Faisal and Abdul Qadir Badauni had translated the Mahabharata in Persian during Akbar's time. You should remember that Akbar's tenure is famous for various translated works. Translation happened directly from Sanskrit to Persian. The name of this Persian translation was Raja Mano Meh. King Rama VI had translated some episodes of the Mahabharata in Thai language. The Adi Parva, Virata Parva, Uddoga Parva, Bhishma Parva, Stri Parva, Ashrama Parva, Bhishma Parva, Mushala Parva, Prasthanika Parva, and Sargarahana Parva in Kavi prose were translated in Indonesia during the reign of Dharmadasha in the 1st century AD. So, these are monumental works because these are carrying the flag of classical Sanskrit literature in different parts of the world. Kalidasa's works and the fables like Panchatantra and the Hitopadesha have also been translated in many foreign languages. But Students, as you will have to study this portion in a separate unit, I have skipped this part deliberately in the present discussion. So, scholars of different parts of the world, they possessed a special type of attraction towards Buddhism. So, Buddhism being a source of attraction to many foreign scholars, the Sanskrit works containing Buddha's life and works remain the source of inspiration to many. Thus, we see that the full Buddha Charita of Ashaghosha was translated into Hungarian language by Joseph Veckerdi with his passion and perseverance. He also has translated a rich selection from the Jatakas in Hungarian language. Karuna Kushalasaya translated the Buddha Charita, the Canto 1 and 5, in Thai language. The Jatakamala has been translated into Thai language by Luang Rajatakarakoshan. It has also been translated into Chinese in 434 AD. Thus, the journey went on. This work has been translated into English by Professor Speer, and it is included in the edited volume of Max Muller, that is Sacred Books of the East. There are 50 volumes of this book, and here in one volume the translation of Jatakamala is included. The Lalita Bistara of Shanti Bhikshu Shastri has been translated into Thai language by Zweng Manabidura. Apart from this, the Purana literature has been translated into many foreign languages. So, there is a vast world of translated works of Purana literature in many languages of different parts of the world. Thoreau has translated many portions of the Harivansha, but he did it from Langlet's French version. So, my dear students, you see how the journey of the classical Sanskrit literature went on. It was translated and retranslated in different languages. So, with the translation and retranslation, the message of different specimen of classical Sanskrit literature reached to the different corners of the world. The Shatakatraya of Bhartrihari were translated into Polish by I. Kania in 1980. The Hitopadesha was translated into Thai by Fra Sarapraseri in 1923. Besides this, the Ratnavali, Priyadarshika, Mritchakatikam, Dashakumara Charita, etc. have also been translated in different foreign languages. Pedro Urbano de la Calle translated the Priyadarshika, Ratnavali and Ritushamhara in Spanish language. Juan Miguel de Mora has translated the Uttara Ramacharita in Spanish. Guela Ozitilia published the Hungarian translation of the Dashakumara Charita of Dandin in 1998. The Kathasarit Sagara was translated into Thai by Sathian Koses along with Tri Nagapradeepa. Professor M. Brisky has translated in Polish the Kama Sutra of Batshayana. Pera Budmani from Croatia translated some of the stories of the Vetala Panchavinshati into Croatian language, which was published in 1867 in Dubrovnik. Andrew Seling has translated the Amarushataka from Sanskrit into English in 2004. Aulo Magnon translated the Swapna Basavadatta in Italian language under the title Bhasha Basavadatta in Sagno in 2001, along with an introduction and notes with it. So, students, these are the treasures of classical Sanskrit literature. The message of classical Sanskrit literature went on passing to different types of people of different lands through these translation and retranslation. Now, it has already been stated that the second group of scholars have assimilated Sanskrit literature and language in their own creations. So, this is the topic of assimilation. So, under the survey of Sanskrit, classical Sanskrit literature, we must take into account this process of assimilation. The famous poet in this regard, who is none other than T.S. Eliot. You have watched my earlier video. You have seen that in his poem, T.S. Eliot has attached the Sanskrit words Ganga and Himabant to prove his inclination towards Sanskrit literature. So, in the wasteland, along with projecting different types of Upanishadic messages, T.S. Eliot has purposefully attached these words like Ganga and Himabant. Yeats, the renowned scholar and poet, wrote the famous sonnet Meru, which also relates the Oriental influence on the poetry. And you all know that the term Meru is very, very common in Indian mythology. There are so many stories attached to Meru. So, we can say that Yeats, in his poem, purposefully has attached the term Meru, and it shows the influence of Sanskrit on this great creator of literature. In the dry salvages of T.S. Eliot's third poem from his Four Quarters, the poet tries to create the image of Krishna found in the Gita. So, what is the image of Krishna in the Gita? Krishna is a motivator. Krishna motivates the mind of Arjuna, and the style of writing is conversational method. So, in this poem of T.S. Eliot, he wants to implement this theory of Krishna, the theory of motivation asserted by Krishna in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Thus, the poet here tries to tell that the divine path should be followed instead of going by the thought of one's own gain. So, what is the message of the poet? The poet wants to pass the message that the individuals in the society shouldn't think of their own gain. They should rather think of the general benefit of the society. They should remember their duties. They should perform their duties in a proper way. They should not run away from their duties, but they should remember that the personal benefit should not be taken as the first and foremost goal of a person. And such a message is the core message of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Among 700 verses of Srimad Bhagavad Gita, there are many verses which reflects this view of doing one's own duty rather being concerned with one's own self. This message has been given in a different way through different verses in the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. I am just quoting one verse for the easy understanding of the students. The verse goes as Athachet tvam imang dharmyam sangramang na karishyasi tatah swadharmang kirting cha hitva papam avapsasi. So it is the 33rd verse of the second chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita. What is the message of this verse? It says that one should not remain away from one's own duty. It is the first and foremost goal of an individual that he or she should do his duty first without being concerned with his own comfort, with his own gain, with his own emotions. One should not be carried away by the emotions of one's own self. He or she should rather overcome these smaller issues and they should go forward for the benefit of the society. The famous American scholar Henry David Thoreau has quoted expressions of the Harivamsha. My dear students, please remember that Thoreau was very much passionate about Harivamsha, Mahabharata and Vishnu Purana, and he was much influenced by the message of the Upanishad and Gita. So in his expressions we find the quotations from Harivamsha, Mahabharata and the Vishnu Purana in his work Walden. It is also written as The Life in the Woods. So here we find Thoreau's quotation. Again, the scholars like Sylvan Levy in his famous book India and the World and Max Muller in his book India, What Can It Teach Us, have offered their obeisance towards India, and obviously these scholars could know India by reading Sanskrit books through translation. So, students, you see that these scholars, they have written their works in English, but the content is related to Sanskrit language and literature and also the ethics of India. So how did they get the matter? They received the matter, the contents, from their readings of various specimens of Sanskrit classical language, though through translation. So by gathering the subject matter on reading the books of classical Sanskrit literature, such world famous and renowned scholars, they made up their own creations in such a way that these works also remain beneficial for the study of the journey of Sanskrit in the foreign land. The Polish scholar A. Stuskiewicz wrote a book in Polish titled as Early History and Legends of India. It is written in Polish language. Thus, all these and such other works could bring the positive side of the journey of Sanskrit literature throughout the world. And one point, it is very important to remember that in this regard, we may add the contributions of Sanskrit scholars of India who composed their works in foreign languages, and it also helped for the dissemination of Indic knowledge related to classical Sanskrit literature in various parts of the world. Such scholars, they have composed works related to the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, the Purana, etc., where they have taken the contents from the specimen of classical Sanskrit literature. As for example, R.V. Joshi, he was a renowned Sanskrit scholar and he remained a teacher of Sanskrit in Mexico for a long time. He wrote books in French, Spanish and English other than books in Sanskrit and Hindi. His French book Les Rituels de la Dévotion Krishnaite is based on the stories of Krishna. So, it could serve the French readers and it could endorse the successful journey of the Krishna story in France and also through France in other places of the world. Again, we are proud to take the name of our renowned scholar, the great Sanskrit scholar of Assam. He was a respected teacher of mine, my guru, Mahamahopadhyay Mukunda Madhav Sharma. He wrote a book in Bahasa Indonesia, that is in Indonesian language. The title of the book being Umsur Bahasa Samskrita Dalam Bahasa Indonesia, where he has shown the elements of Sanskrit in Indonesian language. So we are proud to take the name of such a prolific scholar from our land. Aviraja Rajendra Mishra, another renowned Sanskrit scholar, has written the history of Sanskrit language in Bahasa Indonesia. Not only this, there are examples, there are opposite examples also. That means many foreign scholars, they have written, they have composed their literary pieces in Sanskrit. In this regard, I want to take the example of Horace Hyman Wilson, who wrote the beautiful poem Sanskrita Prashangsha. The first verse of this poem goes as Amritang madhurang samyak Sanskritang hi tatodhikam deva bhagyam idang tasmat deva bhasheti katthate. I think most of the students, they have heard about it, they have read the verse and other verses of Wilson. Those are very beautiful and poetic. So through this two-way journey, Indian scholars writing in different languages, the source being the classical Sanskrit literature, and foreign scholars writing in Sanskrit language and taking the theme of classical Sanskrit literature or Sanskrit language. With this two-way process, the journey of Sanskrit took an upward turn, and it has not been stopped. Even at present day, many modern scholars from different parts of the world, they have come up to take Sanskrit issues, Sanskrit literary pieces as their source, and from that they have come up to construct different types of literary specimen in their own languages. So we are lucky that the journey of Sanskrit classical literature, which started with the translation of Gita, Rig Veda, Ramayana, it never stopped. It has gained its momentum. I mean to say, in every stages, it gained momentum in every sphere. Now we have come to the third point, that is the point of adaptations. Many scholars of foreign land, falling in love with the lore of Sanskrit classical literature, have adapted various portions of these works and placed those before the connoisseurs, adding therein their own thoughts and ideas. Thus, the outer form may be different because of the new get-up, but the inner portion remains almost same with some adaptations. And this way also the journey of classical Sanskrit literature could receive its wings through which it flew higher and higher. So the Ramayana with its Ramakatha, the battle of Mahabharata, the love between Basanta Sena and Charudatta, etc., have been taken as the subject matter of various literary works in the foreign land. For example, Shudraka's Mritchakatika was adapted in a dramatic performance in Croatia in the year 1895 in the main theatre hall in Zagreb. The name of the theatrical performance was Basanta Sena. And 2 years later, in 1897, Kalidasa's Avigyana Shakuntalam was also staged in this foreign land. The great drama Malavika Agnimitram was adapted for performance in German stage under the title The King and the Dancer by Fürstwänger. This way, the story of Mahabharata has also been thematically represented by various foreign scholars in their own way. Alfred John Hiltebettel, the Colombian scholar, has composed more than 5 books on Mahabharata story. Sharon Maas, the novelist, has written her book Sons of God on the basis of the Mahabharata story. And the Siang Satyaban is the Javanese version of the story of Savitri Satyavan found in the Mahabharata. So, my dear students, what I want to place before you is that with the small portions of the renowned pieces of classical Sanskrit literature, the scholars of different language and land, they have created new versions of literary piece, either for performance or for readings. So this way also the journey of classical Sanskrit literature, it got a multi-dimensional momentum. Now, in the same way, there are so many Indian writers. They have also adapted different portions of various poetical works of classical Sanskrit literature. They have taken the kernel, they have adapted the original portions, and they have molded the story, they have molded the story, they have created the story, they have created the piece in a new way. So this is also a very, very important point in the path of journey of the translation of classical Sanskrit literature. In this line, we can name Devdatta Patnaik and Chitra Banerjee Divakarani, who have contributed in their line with their works in English, the subject matter being taken from various Sanskrit sources. Thus, through translation, assimilation and adaptations in various directions, classical Sanskrit literature has been continuing its journey in the realm of world literature since remote past, and it has not been stopped for a while. Various foreign universities have continued their Sanskrit studies with different specimen of classical Sanskrit literature in their curriculum. So, in such universities, they have kept various Sanskrit pieces in their course content, and in this way also classical Sanskrit literature could make an upward journey towards its dissemination, and this way the works of classical Sanskrit literature has also taken the path of dissemination. Thus, classical Sanskrit literature could carve a niche in the entire field of world literature. And my dear students, this is just the tip of the iceberg, because there are so many works, so many translations, assimilation and adaptations which cannot be accommodated for such a small unit. So this is given through a bird's eye view, and I think it will suffice your course content, and going by this, I think you will be able to attend the questions in the examination. But interested students can go for studying these sources, whatever names of the books I have given, what are the names of the Sanskrit scholars I have uttered. They can search in internet, they can search in the books to gain more knowledge. But in general, this will help you for your examination. So here I stop with the subject matter of Unit 1 of the paper 4036 of Sanskrit major under Guwahati University. Thank you.